Howdy folks, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Nerdstalgic with me, your host, Luke. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good. Today's episode is going to be a return to form for me. What I mean by that is the fact of before I did podcasting, I was a book reviewer. I still am a book reviewer, if I'm being honest. But that's what I did before I did podcasting. I reviewed books, I would read them, and I would then spend depending on the book, depending on if how big the book was, or if it was, say, like on the level of 1,000 pages, like Dune, then that would take me a week to 2 weeks to properly sit there and think about my thoughts and write it out. Whereas if it was a lot of smaller books, like for example, the first Harry Potter book, which is only about 200 plus, it's about 300 pages, that would take me about a day or two. So depending on the book, it could take me a few days to a week to more. And obviously, I'd write a review, and I'd publish it on Goodreads, and then hopefully that people would like it. And then I sort of did it on my Instagram. I'd take a picture of with me and myself, with myself, and me, with the book, and it just post it there, and then people like it and comment and tell me if they really like my review, if they didn't like it, or if they like my post and all that. And I still kind of do that now, but since doing podcasting, it's kind of taken over. So I decided that as this is my show, and as I decide what I do here, I wanted to return to form, go back to my roots, and to do something that I haven't done in a while. Actually, this is a topic, and these books specifically were things that I wanted to talk about in April, after I had my huge hiatus, where I was gone for a week of relaxation for Easter break. But it was one thing after another. It was I had done the big sort of news wrap up of all the things that I missed, and then obviously this week you've got a new episode coming out today. I'm recording this for me it would be Wednesday the 11th, but for you folks it'll be next Wednesday, or current Wednesday if you listen to it now. So I recorded this a week ago from when you're hearing this, because of scheduling's fantastic. It's a new thing I figured out on this app on Anchor. But I'm getting off track. What I was basically trying to say is that I've wanted to do a sort of a book review or book sort of deep dive for a while, really. So I finally figured, I put everything else to one side. Nothing's really going on at this current moment. Like I said, I am recording this a week prior. So if loads of things have happened, I can't tell the future. So let's hope that the author of these books doesn't say something outrageous, and then I can't post this at all. So fingers crossed. But I just wanted to go back, and I wanted to talk about a series that I recently completed that I had a lot of fun with and I enjoyed, and I feel like you folks will enjoy them too. Like, they've been out for a long time, so there's potentiality that if you listening to today right now have read them, or have read at least one of them, or have seen the films. Actually, that's probably more likely. You've probably seen the films based off these books. So this is basically me returning to form, giving it a go, seeing how it works, and then if it does work, I might do more of these. And if people like them, then most likely I will do more of them. But as you know, with me, I like to try new things, and again, it's my show, so I can sort of have freedom to experiment. I'm not tied down by having to stick to one thing, which is what I love, which was what my plan from day one when I first originally started this podcast was that I didn't want to be pinned down to being completely broad in just doing games or just doing movies and books. I wanted to do everything that I love, that I'm passionate about. That's why I thought like the name works so well, is because I can be nerdy and I can be nostalgic and I can just be full on passionate and love it. Very hippy dippy I am. I think that's why people listen to me, because I'm very hippy dippy, or that I'm just weird, or that I don't know. People, I don't know why you listen. You only you can tell me why you listen. Well, you can't tell me, but you can technically if you follow me on Twitter. Yeah, there you go. A plug there. But enough waffling from me. This has already gone on for 4 minutes and 32 seconds longer than it needed to. So yeah, let's get into it, shall we? Let's get into this fantastic world. But before I do that, I just remembered, because I was about to stop it and jump right into it, I haven't introduced the book series yet. See, there you go. See, things happen, mistakes happen. We'll edit it out in the editing room. Yeah, brr, brr, brr. Rewind, pause, play, resume. The The book series that I'm going to be talking about is the Hunger Games by by Suzanne Collins. Um, my little overall thoughts and sort of feelings of this series is overall I like them. I really really like them. I really enjoy them. Each one of them is better than the next. Since obviously, like I'm a big sort of like I'll be honest, I'm a big Harry Potter fan. I love Harry Potter. I grew up with it. I've read all the books. I enjoy it. But ever since obviously J.K. Rowling coming out and saying all the things that she says, I don't feel comfortable. Um, I'm still a fan, and I'll happily still watch the movies, and I've still got the original sort of books that released here in the UK. But I just don't feel comfortable. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Comfortable talking about it. You know what I mean? Knowing that I'm even though I'm not specifically referencing who the author is because the author's so big, you can't help not, um, you know, give her more sort of backing and more power because the more that you're giving her sort of what's the word more of a pedestal to stand on, basically. So what I've been looking for is alternatives. I've been looking for things that you can read if you like sort of the Harry Potter books, or even just the fact of if you want to read a series that's fantastic and amazing, but you don't feel comfortable enough sort of reading sort of Harry Potter. So I've been always looking out for series, and obviously during the oh god, was it around about 2008 all the way up to about 2014, about that time, maybe in 2015. You had the big renaissance of books. So like Harry Potter, the movies were doing amazing, and people, and say people, big movie producers were like, oh god, these books sort of projects are really really wow. Look at Harry Potter, it's making millions and billions of dollars. We've got to jump on this market, and they did, and they did Inca, and they did what's it called? I always say, but I want to say Aragon, not Aragon. It's Aragon with an E. The Dragon one, they did that. What else they do? They did the City of Ember. They did the Hunger Games, which is this one. They did Maze Runner. They did Twilight. They did Divergent, and I'm sure more than likely, oh, they did Percy Jackson. Which, I haven't read Percy Jackson, but from everybody I've talked to who've read Percy Jackson, they completely ruined the character and the whole story in the movies. But they did a lot of sort of movie tie-in, book tie-ins, well, book to movie tie-ins. And growing up, I enjoyed, like I said, the Harry Potter movies, and I enjoyed all some of the other smaller sort of movies that they released. But there was just something about the Hunger Games that when I first watched the films, sort of just stuck with me. The whole idea about tributes, and how that this society, how this world and society works, is that because of the actions of the past, that then affects every single generation moving forward, and that to basically resolve for the mistakes that past generations made, the new generations must sacrifice two of their children, a man and a woman, to basically play in a Hunger Games and battle to the death, and whoever is the victor gets the life of luxury and X, Y, and Z. And I like that premise. I love the when I say, well, it's technically post-apocalyptic, but the dystopian sort of feel of the world. How like the world's gone so much to pot that this is the somewhat normality of life now. So I was fascinated by that, and obviously I love the cast. Jennifer Lawrence is just she's beautiful. She's just an incredible actress, and she's just gorgeous. So how can you not fall in love with her as Katniss? It is funny though, as I'm reading these books, and I will get on to, is the fact that I've realised that Jennifer Lawrence plays a good Katniss, but there are certain things in the books that they missed out, which as they do. Like I'm not nitpicking it. It's just the fact that happens quite regularly, where you find certain character beats or story beats that they didn't add into the films, because what you have to imagine, I think I've said this before on the podcast before, is that each page of a book. So, for example, I've got the first Hunger Games book in front of me, and it is, let me flick through, it is 436 pages long, not including all the sort of extra page at the back. It's about 436 pages. Now, each of those pages is a minute. So one page is a minute. That's 436 minutes. Now, I'm not very good at maths, so I'm not going to convert that into hours, but it's a lot of hours. It's a long time. You know what I mean? It's too long for a movie should be, and that's just book one. And the other books are longer. Like book two is 440 pages long. Book three is 400 and 441 pages long. So there's a lot to them, as you would expect from a book, and that normally is a good normal sort of number for a casual book, but relating that into a cinema, into the movie going experience is a bit more jarring. Like I said, each page is a minute. That's a lot of minutes. You've got to condense it. You've got to cut it out as much as possible. Even though the fact of, if you want to do a movie right, well, I say if you want to do a book right, you do it in a TV series, because even though a movie's more grand and more amazing, there's been a lot of book movies out there. If you do it in a TV series, you can sort of stretch it out and you can really focus on those parts. That's why I feel like in the future, I don't think they would do a reboot of Harry Potter. I think in the future, they will do a TV series of Harry Potter, because then they can do everything. But coming back to what I was saying about the Hunger Games, from watching the movies, blew me away. And it wasn't until quite recently, as I was going through my list, that I had I've got a big poster about 100 books to read, and on there was the first Hunger Games book. And I figured, you know what, I really really liked the series. I really loved the characters. I would give it a go. So I remember I got the first Hunger Games book, and that is a good segue into the first part of this review. See how it works there? Swings and roundabouts. I go off and I waffle and I bring it back to what it's meant to be. See, I'm good, ain't I? Right. So, anyway, without further ado, that's the introduction. There's a lot longer introduction than I'd hoped, but that's what we have editing for. So, let's bring it on, shall we? Let's bring it home to the first review of the first book, shall we? So, the Hunger Games books. There's 3 books in total. You got the first book, The Hunger Games. Book 2, Hunger Games: Catching Fire. And book 3, Hunger Games and the Mockingjay. This last book is the one that they split up in 2 parts. As I mentioned before, whenever you sort of do a movie based off a book, each page is a minute long. And like I said, this is about 400 and so pages. So they needed, if they wanted to do everything, if they wanted to basically cap off this story for the films as best as possible, they needed to do it in 2 parts. And again, they did that with sort of Harry Potter, and they've done it before with many other things. They did it with Dune, for example. Even though it's 2 parts of just the first book, to really do Dune justice, you had to do part 1 and part 2, which was completely fine with me. But for a lot of people who haven't read the books, when they figured that out, they were very, very peeved indeed. But I look forward to seeing what Davina, add his name then. Davina Vu. Oh, I've lost it. But whatever the director of those films decides to do, I'm really looking forward to it. But back onto the books, because I went on a bit of a side quest there. Back onto the books. Like I said, there's 3 books in total. I've read them all. I've recently finished Mockingjay. Like I said, I think it was around Easter time. But actually, I think it was around January, February, March. Yeah, it was around about March I completed it. And like I said, I had planned to talk about this series around Easter, but I didn't get time to it. So now's my chance. So, book 1, Hunger Games series. What was my thoughts and feelings? What's my overall view? Overall view of the first book, I enjoyed it. I liked it. You're introduced to this post-apocalyptic. I would call it post-apocalyptic, but dystopian sort of future. How that, even though they never sort of state the fact of this is set in quote unquote America, it is America. The idea and premise is that if you in the backstory that either World War III or World War IV, basically humanity annihilated itself. Some people still survived, but majority of the land is infertile, is radioactive, been destroyed, and that the people, whoever was left in America, they destroyed themselves so much that only was left was the younger generation, and that they forgot who they were, what they were, and basically what America was. They lost all their morals. They lost their land. They don't know what it is, so they renamed it Panem, and then it kind of got split up into districts. And because there's not a lot of resources, there's not a lot of resources for power and food and anything to basically keep a society, a civilization running, because they basically nuked each other to hell. That basically gets sets up that you have the capital, which my assumption would be the capital is the where all the politicians and all of the rich folks and basically the president of, say, United States was, and that all the other districts are people who are stuck in certain places, like kind of like tribes, kind of like in Fallout, where originally it started as tribes and as cities. That's a very old original Fallout reference there for anybody old school fan. But basically, the idea and premise of it is, no matter what state you are in, sort of Panem, you become a district. So if your state that you were in has very fertile land, you become a farmer. If whatever state you're in has a lot of mining opportunities, you become a miner and you are District 12. And it gets split up like that. So if you're near the sea, so you like California, New York, that sort of thing, then you could end up being sort of District 1 and District 2. I think District 1 and District 2. I think District 2 is by the sea, or is that District 3? Anyway, the point is that I'm trying to make is the fact of, no matter where you are in the state, in the land, that is your district. That is where you stay. And for a lot of people, kind of thought that wasn't fair. It wasn't fair. This is where we're stuck. We're starving too. We want food as well. We're just giving food to the capital. And as you would imagine, a rebellion starts up. The capital, being the more superior power, squashes the rebellion as soon as, kind of like Star Wars. But basically says that's it, to kind of make up for the mistakes that you made, that each generation of your children and their children, every year will be judged by a trial by combat, basically, where we'll take one boy and one girl from each district, and they will fight to the death, and whoever wins will be the victor. Now, sort of move on 74 years into the future, and we're stuck with Katniss Everdeen. Now, I say that as a bad way, but that's probably a bad way to phrase it. But we are now with Katniss Everdeen. This is where the Hunger Games book starts. 74 years later, it's been going on for a very, very long time. It's got to a point now where it's normal, where seeing people die on the TV is not normal. It's not just normal. It's a pastime. You know what I mean? As much as, like, for example, we watch the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial on TV, how normal that is to see into the lives, and to, again, it comes to the fact of, why is a court case live on TV or live on YouTube or whatever? It's one of them things of just like, it shouldn't be normal, but it is normal. And I know it's a weird thing to compare it to, but that's kind of the first thing that came to mind. It was just the fact of something that you wouldn't assume a couple of years ago would be a normal thing. Unless you're in the jury, you wouldn't know anything about it. But nowadays, it's a completely normal, rational thing. It's kind of the same things with the Hunger Games. Is the fact of, if we saw somebody die live on TV now, we'd all be shocked. There'd be people online on Twitter going, "This is wrong. This is disgusting. I don't want to see it." There'd be complaints. There'd be outrage. But in the world that they're in, where basically the capital controls everything and has the say in everything, and that they're going to show people die no matter what. And it could be your son, it could be your best friend, it could be your brother, your sister. You're basically forced to watch it play as well, because there's no way you can't watch. Each district is forced to sit and watch. So it basically becomes a point where it goes from being seen as bad to just seen as normal. If somebody dies, it's just, people die every day. It's not a bad thing. It's, life is no longer sacred, and that's the kind of thing I'm trying to get at here, is the fact of the Hunger Games has become a sport now. It's a live TV. It's something that people bet on. It's something that people just see as trivial. As trivial as breathing. It's just normality. And so obviously that breeds chaos. That breeds anger. That breeds hate. That breeds a world full of psychopaths, in a way. People who are so what's the word I'm looking for? They're so numb to death that what is the point of living anymore? You know what I mean? Other than just to watch, to basically fill your bellies, watch people kill each other for one time, for once a year, and then just to rinse and repeat. Like, what kind of society is that? And that's kind of the world that you sort of poured into. And it's kind of the world where Katniss is as well, because Katniss is one of these sort of characters where she is the reader. She sees the world and kind of sits there and goes, none of this is right. None of this makes sense. And the other districts and the other people in the story are the same thing. But Katniss is very much the reader. You know, she is you in the story. She's very much the fact of none of this makes sense. This is all very much surreal. Um, and it's very much the fact of I'm just going to try and keep my head down until I get old enough where I will no longer be in the running for the Hunger Games, and then hopefully I can just all I got to do then is focus on my sister, make sure that she never gets chosen. But as we all know, if you've seen the films, if you read the books, the 74th annual games comes to her district to choose both a boy and a girl, and as the choice is being made, Katniss' sister Prim gets chosen. Katniss jumps up straight away very selflessly and says, I volunteer as tribute, takes the place. Then we get Peter Malark. He then is chosen out of the boys, and they go off to the capital, and they start the Hunger Games. And I won't really get into the sort of the full sort of story of the Hunger Games, because I want to sort of talk about the other books in the series. But throughout sort of this first book, Katniss is very much under the lines of none of this makes sense. You know, it's very much the fact of, you know, we're all getting ready, we're all trying to be happy chappy, you know, be friends, act as normal. But, you know, in a couple of days' time, I'm going to be killing him over there, you know, i.e. Peter. He's going to be my enemy. Like, you all want me to be friends with him and sort of work with him, but I don't really want to be anywhere near him because I don't really want to show him what my skills, what I can and can't do, because then you have an advantage over me, you know. So I don't really want to trust him. I don't want to be anywhere near him. And not just that, it's the fact of you telling me that I've got to basically sort of play the part and play a role of like the just normalcy of like I've got to make people love me and like me so that, you know, I have more chance of survival in it. It's that very much of where she doesn't get it. It all makes no sense. And of course, like you as the reader, it doesn't make any sense to you as a fact because again, we don't live in a world where this is normal. You know, to experience a world like this, you'll only see it in a book or, you know, in a movie. It's not something that we know. So again, that's what I like about Katniss's sort of character, and I will get onto it with the second and third book. But as she evolves, you evolve. As you read these books and this story, so does your thoughts and feelings of this world and different sort of events start to converge, and you become Katniss. You know, you basically become her because you're very much the fact of none of this is right, and the choices that certain characters make and certain events happen is very much of I don't want to be here at all. I want to keep reading, but I don't want to be in this world. You know, not in a bad way. It's just the fact of because the way this world is. But as I mentioned, you have Peter as well. Peter's the love puppy who who basically is in love with Katniss. I love this romance. I do. I very much feel that Katniss doesn't deserve Peter. To be honest, it sounds horrible to say, and I know a lot of people, if you're fans of the series and you listen to this, you're probably going to hate me for this, but I feel that Katniss doesn't deserve love, and I will expand on that. Trust me, when I get to the third book. But I don't think she does. What she does need is counselling and an extreme amount of help and um, um, a lot of sort of therapy. Uh, that's what she needs, and she needs time away to relax. And like I said, I will expand on that in book 3. But you see hints of it here, where you know she does love and have affection for Peter, but there are times where you are sitting there, you're thinking, does she genuinely love him? Is there really love and affection there? Or has she convinced you, the reader, and has she convinced herself that she does love him so that other people will believe that she loves him so that she can save him? And that she can save herself, most importantly, because she always makes it. She's always been very clear from day one. Her main priority is Prim, and that you know she doesn't have really much of a relationship with her mom, and that she can't leave Prim with her mom because Prim, you know, she can't guarantee Prim will have a good life or be looked after properly if she does. So it's very much the fact of, I've got to survive, not for me, but for Prim. And if I have to use this boy, Peter, to do it, then so be it. And that's basically sort of the idea of the first book, really, is the fact of her going into the first Hunger Games and trying to survive and kind of convincing you that she's not just a survivor, because she is a survivor, but also convincing you the fact of there is real love there between Peter. Because at one stage of the book, even though, as I mentioned, Katniss is you are Katniss in this book, there are moments, like I mentioned, with the whole sort of star-crossed lovers, convincing you that, and convincing herself that she is in love with Peter, but also she's got to convince the audience, she's got to convince all the people watching the Capitol that this sort of relationship is true. And as the series goes on, again, it's that more of that convincing the fact of where you then become the audience, and that she's basically trying to prove to you, like, yeah, I do love Peter, I do have affection for him, and I do feel, as the books go on, that that is there, but it is very much the fact of, with this relationship, with this sort of love, with this star-crossed lovers thing, that it gets a bit muddled as the story goes on. And one of my favorite characters is Hamish. Hamish is the best way to explain it. He is the drunken master. He is basically he's a past victor of one of the games for District 12. He's the only victor for District 12, actually. And how can I explain it? All he does all day, every day is drink, because he lost everything when he went to the games. He lost himself. He lost his family. He lost his love of his life. He killed. He survived. He won. Again, it's that part of what cost. And there's a lot. What I love about this series, there's a lot of mental health struggles in this book. There's a lot of trigger warnings in this book. How it deals with mental health, how it deals with depression, loneliness, addiction, physical and mental trauma. The idea of if you survive the game's great, but again, at what cost? How do you survive? You know what I mean? Did you hide out? Did you survive because you just was a coward that you hid, or did you survive because you were the most brutal, that you butchered and killed your way? And again, that sticks with you. Taking a life, not that I know, because I've never done it, but I would imagine that taking a life takes a toll on somebody. Takes a toll on you, and Hamish goes through that. And again, we see it with Katniss. She goes through it as well. And this is why I say that she doesn't need love. She needs a therapist, because especially when we get to the last book, she's a broken soul. She's just been destroyed. But in this first book, you have the events of the Hunger Games. You have the events of the Volunteer, the Tribute, the star-crossed lovers. You have Hamish as well. Introduction of one of the best characters, which is Hamish. And it all comes together in a great story. It ends sort of well, but it ends in such a way that sort of says, just because you've won the Hunger Games, just because you survived, just because you beat the system, doesn't mean you're no longer in the games. The Hunger Games has just begun for you. You survived the arena, but now you've gone into part 2, arena 2, which is now having to live knowing that you tricked the capital, and that you've tricked everybody, and now you've got to live with that sort of star-crossed lover sort of vibe, which again I will get on with into as I get into book 2. But that's book 1. I really, really enjoyed my time with book 1. I think, if I remember correctly, I think I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I really enjoyed it. It's a like I said, it's a fantastic introduction to this world. It's a fantastic introduction to the characters. It's really gripping. There's a huge sort of thriller behind it. If I remember correctly, and I feel like I'm remembering this correctly, and if I mentioned this before, I do apologize, because I've been editing. I will edit. I do a lot more editing now in my sort of what's the word I'm looking for, in the podcast. So if I had mentioned this before, I do apologize if I haven't edited out. But I do remember that Stephen King, the reason why this first book became so popular was because of Stephen King. Was because Stephen King basically recommended it and said how good it was, and as he told all his followers, and as we know how big Stephen King is, that it kind of grew traction, and that's why this book became so popular. Not saying it wouldn't anyway, because again, this book is a very good series, but that's what I think happened, of what I've been told or what I've heard. Again, don't quote me on that. That's pure speculitis from me. Don't guarantee, but it wouldn't surprise me because, like I said, it even has a quote here on the back by Stephen King: "Constant suspense. I couldn't stop reading." You know what I mean? Once you see a book by Stephen King, well, a recommendation by Stephen King, you have to read it, which is kind of funny because I've read a few books that Stephen King has read, and it's even got Stephen King on the back saying, "Oh, I loved it. It was a great book." This is the only book that I've read that was quoted by Stephen King enjoying that I actually enjoyed. All the other books that I've read, I haven't enjoyed. I'm not saying that Stephen King has a bad taste in books, but I just don't enjoy any of the books that he recommends apart from this one. But anyway, that's the first Hunger Games book. On to book 2 now, shall we? So, The Hunger Games, book 2, Catching Fire. Read the blurb. Katniss Everdeen survived the Hunger Games. Now, the capital wants revenge. Against all odds, Katniss Everdeen and Peter Malark are still alive. Katniss should be relieved, but now there are whispers of a rebellion against the capital, a rebellion that Katniss and Peter may have helped create. As the nation watches Katniss and Peter, the stakes are higher than ever. One false move, and the consequences will be unimaginable. May the odds be forever in your favour. This is book 2. And this one, I believe, is where the nitty gritty comes in. This is where the events start to really take hold of the idea of the rebellion, the idea of the Mockingjay, the idea of basically time is up on the capital. The capital have had their fill. They've had their time. It is now time for another rebellion. But also, this is the beginning. Well, not even the beginning, really. Sort of the edge of where Katniss basically begins to lose it, because she's already gone through the first Hunger Games. She's already traumatized about what she's had to do and the death of Rue. So she's still kind of mentally tortured. But also this kind of the fact of, as I mentioned, she's now, just because she's won the Hunger Games, just because she's won the first sort of event, doesn't mean the games are over. She's just gone from one arena to the next. The problem is this second arena is arena of her own making. This is the star-crossed lovers arena, where she's basically having to keep up this facade of being in love with Peter, even though she knows in her head that she doesn't know she really loves him. There's affection there, and I do believe there's affection there, but she doesn't really know she properly loves him. And the fact of, she now has to keep up this facade of, I love Peter, Peter is the love of my life, and all that jazz, because if she doesn't, then the capital and Lord Snow, which Lord Snow already knows that she basically lied, but everybody will know that she lied and that she tricked everybody, and then District 12 was be in danger, family will be in danger, everybody she loves and cares about will be destroyed. So she has to keep this up so that she can keep everything looking as prim and proper as it should be, or as complete and utter annihilation of everything she knows and loves. And again, that's got to bring mental torture to you as well. The anxiety, the stress. Do I say the right things? Do I do the right things? There's a rebellion going on, and I can't say certain things because if I say that, that's going to spur up the rebellion. But if I don't say the proper things, people are not going to believe that I am telling the truth. So it's that grey line. And that's basically this book. It's just the fact of the first half of it is just trying to ride that line of making sure that I say and do the right thing, so I don't cause a rebellion, but the rebellion's already happening. But if I don't stay on this line, I'm going to lose everything that I love. One thing that I love about the first half about this story is the fact of, again, this is why I say she doesn't deserve Peter, is because we get introduced more into the idea of Gale, and that who Gale is, and how Gale is the one that sort of Katniss originally, before she met Peter, is the guy that she loved, the guy that she had affection for, and that Peter is basically just a guy that's there You know what I mean? And that she's struggling with this because again, she's only sort of still like a teenage girl as well. She's still stuck between that fact of is it Gale or is it Peter? And I was worried that it was going to go full Twilight, that it was going to be like, oh, you're going to have the Edward and Jacob situation. But it doesn't. It does it in such in a good way. Well, basically the idea of like she flirts and she sort of kisses Gale, but on the outside she's always with Peter because she has to always be with Peter. But one thing that I love but hate, and I love it because as a story beat, it's fantastic. But as a fan and as a lover of these characters, I hate is the fact of this is the beginning of basically telling Peter nothing. Peter doesn't know anything. Peter isn't because Hamish and Katniss basically work together to plan out how they can best play out this star-crossed lovers story. How best they can play out this whole sort. There's a rebellion happening, and we've got to be ready for it. But they don't tell Peter. So as far as Peter knows, for this whole first act of this, well, even for the second act of it, but the first act is the fact of Katniss is really starting to come around. You know, Katniss is really starting to like me, enjoy me. You know, there's love there, there's care that I love for her. You know, and not just that, Katniss is also when the camera's not on them. You know, she's being nice. She's being nice to him, but also the fact that she shares his bed, not in a sexual way, but in a way the fact of um, because of the night terrors and because all the issues that she has of not being able to sleep properly because of all the things she did and she saw in the first Hunger Games in the last book, that she does sleep with Peter in the same bed and they cuddle because she needs someone to have like to be there, and Peter is that guy to kind of wrap his arms around her to tell her that she's safe, that she's secure. You know what I mean? That kind of like a tree, because she used to sleep in the trees in the first book. Kind of like a tree. Peter is her tree. Peter is her rock, her root. You know, he's the one that keeps her grounded. And so, like I said, there is love and affection there, but it's because Peter's left in the dark and because Peter's never told about certain things or what's going on, that when we get to the second half of the story, how that, you know, the 75th annual Hunger Games begins, that they both believe, okay, now we have to basically train a new um, boy and girl from District 12 and be their mentors to basically tell them um, what they should and shouldn't do, basically how to survive. Getting ready for that, it basically turns out that that's not the case. That this 75th one is a special one, and that they have to a special card has been drawn that has basically I'm brushing over it, but the basic premise of it is when the first Hunger Games started, there was written on certain cards that like at the sort of 10th anniversary, 25th anniversary, and 30, 30, 35th anniversary, 45th, 55th, and so on and so forth. Every fifth anniversary, um, there would be a card would be pulled from this slot, and each card will have written on a certain thing. So sometimes it's, I think one of the examples was that you'd have, so like for example, Hamish is one of these people who had, when he did it, was one of these cards, and instead of having 12, I think it's how much is this? It's like there's instead of having as the normal amount of victors that they normally have, like normal amount of like people sort of competing, they then double it. So they take more people from each district, and they have, so it's more of a it's a lot harder. They have more people, more survivors, and so Hamish was involved in one. It was in one of them, and that's basically sort of the idea and premise of that thing. So when it gets around to the 75th, one of the cards that gets pulled is the fact of all prior victors, all prior winners now have to basically compete to kind of prove to the to Panem that just because that you're a winner doesn't mean you're absolved of your past. So that past winners now have to compete in the Hunger Games. Obviously, they all think it's bullshit and they think it's unfair, which wouldn't you? Isn't that kind of the whole point of doing the Hunger Games in the first place? Of slaying and butchering fellow people, fellow humans, to have this kind of luxury where you never have to do anything like that again. You know what I mean? So that's the second part of the stories where they're now kind of stuck in having to, because there's two people. There's two boy winners in District 12, and they're obviously Katniss is the only girl to ever win. So obviously we all know Katniss is going to be is stuck, so it's going to be between Hamish and Peter, and Peter, being Peter, jumps in front of Hamish and goes, "No, I volunteer as tribute to fight with Katniss." And I feel like at this moment that they really that sort of Katniss and Hamish should have really been open and honest with Peter at this moment, because in Peter's mind, they're in love. He needs her. That there needs to be that sort of protection, and Hamish would have fought. I think Hamish, if Hamish given a chance, I think he would have, not happily, but I think he would have, gone into the arena with Katniss. But Katniss knew that Hamish needed to be on the outside, but also Katniss knew that Peter probably would volunteer, and he did. But like, at this moment, I feel like they should have brought Peter into the fold. They should have just told him everything, be open and honest with him about their plans, because what their plans sort of are is basically this whole. Now that we've got no choice, that we try to put this Hunger Games off, but no matter what we do, this Hunger Games will still go through. So that we've got to sort of spike and stir the rebellion. We've got to get the rebellion going. Otherwise, things like this is going to keep happening. But they don't tell Peter. Nobody really tells Peter anything. And there are even moments in this story where even sort of Katniss is kept out of the loop. And basically, from then on, it's that sort of thing where Katniss gets to the point where she disagrees. She goes, "No, like, I don't give a shit about my life, about what happens to me. I don't want this rebellion. I didn't want anything to do it in the first place. I didn't really want to do the Hunger Games in the first place. I only did it to save my sister. My sister is now safe. I don't want to be involved. But the problem is the fact of my sister won't continue being safe. If I don't play along, if I don't keep pretending to be a star-crossed lover in the first part of the book, if I don't, carry on in sort of these sort of Hunger Games." And so she basically goes, "No, like, I don't care about my life. I'm a bad person. I don't deserve to live. So I'm going to do everything I can to keep Peter alive. As long as I can keep Peter alive, that, if it means it's just us two, then I'll happily kill myself and then let Peter win." And that's her sort of prerogative. And again, it comes back to the fact of, it's hard to tell the fact of, at times, is there really love and affection there? Is there real sort of care? Do they really generally love each other? And they try everything. They even was going to get married, and like they were saying about there's going to be a baby, and all in this jest was trying to get the capital on their side, so the capital would basically riot and say, "No, like, we can't do this. We can't let a pregnant woman fight. We can't do this because everybody in the capital loves these two and they want them to get married, and it's going to be the marriage of the century, and all that kind of stuff." And obviously, as far as Peter knows, it's that sort of thing of trying to keep Katniss alive. Like Katniss is trying to keep him alive, but he's trying to keep her alive. Again, it's that same thing. It's the symmetry, just on two different sides, where Peter would rather die than let Katniss die. So he would sacrifice himself to save her, to make sure that she lives. And near to the end of this book, Katniss basically is the same. She's like, "I would rather die than let Peter die." You know what I mean? And it's a fantastic sort of deep dive into sort of the whole idea of love, the whole idea of caring for somebody so much, but also the fact of the mental trauma that comes not just with that, but also trying to keep wear a mask, keep a facade. Because she goes, like I said, Katniss's life. She goes from one arena to the next. She has the physical arena, then she has the mental arena, then she has the physical arena again, and then near to the end of this book, she has the mental arena that's heavily extra reinforced about the end events of this book. But overall, this second book, like I said, it really fans the flames. It gets the spark going, so that when we get to the third book, that's when you have Katniss at her, not just at her most deadliest, but also at her sort of wit's end, where she is very sort of bipolar. The one moment she can be normal, happy, next moment she's lost it. She's going crazy. She is losing her mind, and she's going deeper in depression, into loneliness. She's going deeper into sort of her own mind, that she's starting to lose who she was, and now she doesn't know, is she still Katniss? Is she still the person that volunteered? You know what I mean? Because especially when it, obviously I will get into that one in a minute, but through in this book she's very much beginning to sort of lose everything, but she still has Peter, so she still has some sort of gleam in hope. But overall, like the second book, again, like I said, it was really really good. It was a bit slow, if I'm being honest, mainly because, like I said, it's set into two parts. You have the first part, which is the, like I said, the Star Crash lovers sort of story, which again is very very interesting. Then the second part is sort of the 75th annual Hunger Games, and you get to meet all the other sort of prior victors. One of my favourite being Finnick. I love Finnick, and I love the guy that plays him in the movies. Does a fantastic job of playing Finnick. But Finnick is one of my sort of favourite characters. Obviously, I didn't mention any of the other victors or anything like that. But the second book is a lot of fun. You know, if you enjoyed the first one, you enjoyed the second one because it just expands on everything. Like I said, it fans the flames of what is to happen next. The whole rebellion, the whole mental health struggle, the whole sort of fight between sort of Katniss, Gale, and Peter. You know what I mean? This whole sort of story of this is a crazy situation and I'm going crazy in this situation, but I have to kind of stay sane as possible because I am now the Mockingjay. I am now the figurehead, the leader of this rebellion. Like if I lose it, the rebellion loses. So I then have to go into another arena, which is now I am forced upon myself now to go to the battle arena, the real world, as well as fighting this arena that I have in my head, my mental health struggles, my internal struggle, my internal arena. So everywhere she goes, there is an arena. There is a new fight to be had. You know what I mean? There's a new struggle. And that's the thing about this book, this series, is the fact of the mental health struggles. It's the, if anything, the Hunger Games itself is completely and utterly another way to explain what a person goes through with their mental health, where you have to battle your demons, you have to be the victor, you have to be the winner. And when you are the winner, the idea is once you've killed everybody, once you've killed every demon that's on your back, that, you know, you will be the victor. But as we find in book 2 and as we find more in book 3, that just because you become a victor doesn't mean it ends for you. That we learned from Finnick that yeah, he won, but because he's desirable, because he's beautiful, because he's handsome, because he's a gorgeous man, that just because he's won doesn't mean he's won. That he's now being used as a sex slave by the capital. He is sold by the capital to other rich people to basically to sleep with him or to take him or to do with him whatever they want to do with him. You know what I mean? Because he's desirable. You know what I mean? And so again, it's that mental trauma of stuff like that. It's just coming back to what I was saying is the fact of, you know, just because you've won, just because you feel like you've beaten all your demons, doesn't mean around the corner something might trigger them and you start back from the beginning. Or just because you're free doesn't mean you're always free. It's that constant struggle, that constant program of with mental health and the struggle that a person goes through. That they might look sane and normal on the surface, but simmering below is a cauldron just waiting to sort of bubble all over. You know, and if anything, that's what you could do. You could say that the Hunger Games, the actual games themselves, is just another way to explain the human struggles that we go through in our minds, within ourselves. You could do. Like I said, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that's the kind of thing you can get into. And like I said, with this second book, that's expanded upon. The mental health aspect is expanded upon. You know, the arenas that we build ourselves to survive, the mental arenas that we build so that we can be the victor when sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. You know what I mean? And by the time we get to the third book, as I mentioned, Katniss is lost it. She's completely lost who she is. But I will get onto that now. So that's book 2. I really, really enjoyed it. Like I said, if you enjoyed the first one, you'll enjoy this one because, like I said, it expands on everything. So, on to the final book, book 3. And finally, book 3, Hunger Games, the Mockingjay, or Mockingjay. The blurb reads, "If we burn, you burn with us. Katniss Everdeen has survived the Hunger Games twice. or technically more, really. It's like I said, the mental sort of arenas that she goes into. But Katniss has won the Hunger Games twice, but she's still not safe. A revolution is unfolding. Everyone, it seems, has had a hand in the carefully laid plans. Everyone except Katniss, and yet she must play the most vital role in the final battle. Katniss must become their Mockingjay, the symbol of rebellion, no matter what the personal cost. And right there and then, right at the very end, the personal cost, as I was mentioning, the fact of as we follow Katniss through these 3 books, there's a degradation where she slowly loses herself, where she realizes that it's all a sham, it's all a lie, that her having now to be the Mockingjay, she's given up. She doesn't want to be the Mockingjay. She didn't want the rebellion, because she's looking around, she's seeing what happens for rebellion. There's death, there's destruction, you know. In this rebellion, District 13, the place she calls home, all the people she knew, you know, while she was being rescued at the end of book 2, District 12 was basically flattened. It was destroyed, you know. So her home's gone. You know, it's completely annihilated. It's a crater. And all the people that have died in all the other districts, all the people that are still currently dying while she's sitting around recovering, after the events of the second book, it's that kind of thing of like, what do I have to give? Like, what more do you want from me? I've given you my symbol. I've given you my life, my everything, my blood. You know, how much more will it take for you to realize that I have nothing more to give? You know what I mean? I am spent. Like, and near to the end, this book is mostly focused. It's not really till the end of this book that we actually get to the capital. Majority of this last book is spent with Katniss basically coming to terms with the fact, with her own mental struggles, with her demons. Like I said, by the time we get to this book, she is a broken woman. You know, all the people, all the things that she knows been destroyed. You know, she's now stuck in a bunker in District 13. She hates that she's always been lied to, that she wasn't part of the plan, that she thought the plan was to keep Peter alive, but it turns out the plan was to keep her alive, and that Peter is now captured and being tortured and God knows what by the Capitol, and that, you know, she didn't want this for anybody really. The plan was for Peter, and it turns out that, you know, Peter's not important, and that they just said that to her so they could get her on board, and that at the end of the day they just wanted her because they wanted her symbol. They needed the Mockingjay, and, you know, she happened to be it, so that's just who they needed alive, you know. And again, it's that fact of, you know, who chooses to live or to die, and how is that fair, you know? And like I said, in Katniss's mind, she's gotten to the point where she feels like she doesn't deserve to live. You know, yes, she has Prim, but she just, you know, I look what I've done. Look at everything I've caused. I've caused more death outside the arena without actually having to do anything, without actually, you know, of saying anything or doing anything. All I've done is I've just caused a rebellion. I am the reason for all this death and destruction. I'm the reason the capital, you know, has gone on a rampage and is destroying the districts. I am the reason why the rebellion and all the people are now going off and killing capital soldiers and people. You know, I am the cause of this. I am sort of the archetype, the architect of all this, and that, you know, if I die, I become a martyr. Just because I die doesn't mean this ends. You know what I mean? So it's just coming to terms with that. It's coming to terms with that fight, and it's really, really fascinating. But it's fascinating to me because I'm very, very interested in stories that deal with mental health, and deals with the struggles one goes into. One of my favourite books, one of my favourite classical books, is Crimes and Punishment, which I won't go into full detail about Crimes and Punishment. But that deals with a character that deals with mental health struggles, and deals with his own demons. And as near to the end of the book, he basically absolves himself and absolves of his of what he did and what happened, and basically becomes a new person. And that kind of happens here with the fact of she's still broken and Katniss is still dealing with her issues. But as things start to happen, where she finds that Peter's still alive and that there's a way to save him, that, you know, she's like, I have to do something, but I don't want to. I know I don't want to do anything, but I know I have to do something. So I will be your Mockingjay. But I want to have. I've got some things like I've got some sort of what's the word? What's it called now? I've got some like sort of things that need demands that need to be happening. Like you need to save Peter, but you need to not just save him but absolve him. All crimes and punishments, blah blah blah, absolve him, as well as all the other victors as well. Um, and that once it's over, once this war's over, like I want nothing more to do with you. I want nothing to do with the fighting, anything. Like once I am done, once I've won this war for you, that's it. It's over. Um, and as this story sort of progresses and as it goes on, you get moments of just of pure war, of death and destruction, of what comes when war happens. Innocent people get stuck in the crossfire. Um, there's so much death that Katniss starts to get basically numb to it. Like the capital, she basically becomes like everybody in the capital, where she sees death as everyday thing. It still hurts when she sees it, but she becomes numb to it. And as I mentioned, near to the end of this book, as she's going through the different districts, as she's fighting her way through, and as she's sort of coming to terms with this war and what she's done, and she's becoming numb to death at this point, to killing people, that she's like, who am I anymore? Who is Katniss Everdeen? It's not me. I'm no longer that person. That's just a name that people call me, but I'm not that person anymore. And again, it's reinforced when they say Peter. In fact, it's revealed that Peter was basically brainwashed and had his mentally tortured by the Capitol, and that he basically wants to. He's now what's the word? Mentally scarred himself because of the torture, and he doesn't know what's real and what's not real. He's not sure what's reality, because he's got so many sort of false memories in his head that have been planted by the Capitol. He has this moment of, like, he will say an event and he will go real or fake, and people will go, well, that actually did happen, that was real. He's like, okay, and he'll say another one and he'll be like, no, that's fake by the Capitol. So he's going through the mental struggles as well. But also it's the fact of what they did to him. Originally it was the fact of, I have nothing but bad and hateful memories of Katniss, I blame Katniss for everything, and he just wants to kill her. He sees her as a cancer that he has to squash her, destroy her, put her out, pull out the flame. And again, this is through the mental sort of torture that he went through with the Capitol, that they put him through. And this story just deals a lot with the mental torture, not just of war, but also of the effects of death. Seeing so much death, you might get to a point where you become numb to it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't affect you still. And as they're fighting their way to the Capitol, and once they get into the Capitol, they see a lot more death. They see that the Capitol itself is its own mini Hunger Games. The Capitol had basically booby-trapped the whole city, where people used to live there, live normal lives, and live normal, carefree lives, feeling that they were away from danger at all times. But it turns out that the city is a giant maze, that it's built for, if somebody was to invade, it would act as a giant arena, like its own Hunger Games sort of arena. And that comes back to what I was saying at the beginning in the first book, is that once you get to the point where you can make death seem trivial, that human lives are nothing at all, like there's no equivalent, they are just less than dirt. Once you get to that point, you start to be easily rationalised of, like, yeah, we can put booby traps in the city that that can be set off, and some traps, it can be like the floor will open up and it will open up to a giant pit of blades and chop people in half, or it could be a giant blinding bright light that incinerates you instantly, or a gun that pops up, or it could be a mine, where a bomb, or it could be anything that any sort of crazy, insane way that you could kill a person, that would happen. And as I was reading that chapter, it kind of blew me away how that people were living like this. Weren't new things that they were adding. These have been there since like the city was built. That they originally had planned this to basically put these sort of pods in, that at any moment the city gets attacked, a way to defend itself is, to turn it into a giant arena. And again, it comes back to the fact of when killing people and just killing in general becomes such a normality, where's the line? And Katniss questions that as well. And there is a moment where they escape danger, and they come out through this network into this room, and there's a person there, and this person, before they can say anything, this person could have said hello, or are you okay, need help, or the person could have shouted and said, oh, she's over here. Katniss doesn't hesitate. She doesn't hesitate at all. Before that person could even get a word out, like a breath, anything, shot her, killed her, dead, and moves on. And even Katniss looks back on that moment and is like, that person could have literally been our saviour. That person could have helped us, but at the same stage, that person could have ratted us out and told the capital where we was, so that person was dead on arrival. There was no, if they were good or bad, it didn't matter. Just because they met that person when they did, that character's gone now, dead. And again, where's the line drawn? Where do you draw the line now? Like, she's tried so hard for so long, Katniss, that to not be like the capital, to not be their puppet, to not be the rebellion's puppet, to not kill willy-nilly, to basically try to be good in a world that's bad. But now she's gotten to the point where she just kills without questioning anymore. She just does it because she can't sort of justify what's real and what's not real, and who's good and who's not good, because everybody that she knows has lied to her. The only person that's been decent to her is Peter. And even now that Peter wants to kill her because of the mental sort of torture that he's gone through, he's still honest with her. Because Peter only knows the bad things. The way he was tortured was that all the bad negative things, all the times that she lied to him or didn't tell him the truth or anything like that, is basically heightened. So in his mind, he has that constant sort of memory of bad things, and he reminds her constantly, and he reminds everybody of, like, look, remember, she lied to us. She told us this and she did that. She told me this and she did that. She lied to me. She betrayed me. And he constantly lets Katniss know of her failings, which is not a great thing to do, especially when you're in mental struggle and enough stress as it is trying to survive because loads of people are trying to kill you. But also it's the fact of he's being honest with her. She sees him as being honest, being open, that he's the only person who's ever told me honestly before he was tortured and after he was tortured. He's the only person that told her straight how it is, how he sees her, and how she sees herself, really. So the only person you can trust is the guy that's trying to kill her. So it gets to the point of where, like, once near to the end of the story, that it's that question of what is the point? We've won, but things haven't changed. Things were going to go back the way they were. So she does. I'm not going to spoil it, but she does something that nobody thought, or I knew because obviously I watched the films. Was that thing of, like, you wouldn't have saw coming at all. You know what I mean? And at the end of it, it's that sort of thing of, like, she decides that it's all over now. I'm going to do what I said, and I'm just going to go back to District 12. I'm going to rebuild. I'm going to live in a wood, in a clearing, in the woods, and I'll live out the rest of my days sort of, at peace. And she does. Her and Peter, they live together, forever. But they both still have their own sort of foibles. They still have their own mental scarring. Peter still can't distinguish what's real and what's not real. What memories are good, happy memories and actually happened, and what memories are bad, fake memories, or even what bad memories actually happened. So you have Peter. He's still going through his sort of mental trauma that he's gone through. Katniss, again, she's still going. She still has a night terror. She still remembers everybody she ever killed or all the deaths she's seen. And that's why I said that what Katniss needs really is a therapist. She needs counselling. She needs someone to talk to. Because one thing I missed out, well, I mentioned it a bit with Peter, but one thing I missed out was the whole sort of love triangle between Peter and Gale. And that, especially in this last book, it comes up a lot in this last book, this whole sort of love triangle between them. And I said to a couple of friends of mine, is the fact of, I guess she's a teenager, but she doesn't need a boyfriend. She doesn't need Peter. She doesn't deserve Peter. I don't like Gale. Gale is a character I just really just don't like. I just dislike him. But she doesn't need Gale. She doesn't need any guy in her life, any relationship. What she needs is a plan, a program. She needs a therapy, counselling. She needs real sort of proper psychological help. And obviously, I don't know if therapy and all that sort of exists in this world because it's never really mentioned. But that's what I feel like she needs. But in turn, what she uses is the boys. She uses Gale and she uses Peter to kind of soothe her mind, to keep her calm, to keep her level. Because without either of them, she goes off the rails and she just loses it completely. So again, it's the fact of, and this is the same question that I sort of asked myself when I finished the book, is the fact of, does she love Peter, or is she still using him? Is there really love there? You know what I mean? Or does she just know that if she loses Peter, then she will lose herself? So to keep herself sane, to keep herself there, to keep Katniss the person that she knows herself to be, not just a name but a person. If Peter goes, will she just become nothing? Will it all come flooding back? Basically, Peter's a comfort blanket, and that if that blanket was to be destroyed, would she ever seek comfort again? And who would she seek comfort in? It wouldn't be Hamish. Like, she likes Hamish, she's good friends with Hamish, but Hamish has got his own demons to deal with, which is the one thing that I haven't mentioned. But Hamish, he's an alcoholic because of all the sort of mental trauma that he's gone through. Because again, him, like Katniss, he sees everything as a joke, kind of like the comedian in The Watchmen. Once you really realise how much of a joke life is, you know what I mean. You can't do nothing but sort of see the funny side of it all. You can't help not laugh and kind of it's all gone to shit. So fuck it. You know what I mean. Laugh and drink and get drunk and pass out, and that's basically what Hamish does. He gets himself drunk because that way he can sleep his days away. He can just waste his life away in booze, so he doesn't have to remember everything that he did or everything that he's seen and done, and basically so he doesn't have to be conscious of the world that he's in. So that's the world that the series is left in. It's left in that the rebellion's won. New good things are coming in. Times are changing. The world is better. Hunger Games is no longer. It's fairer and better for everybody. But it's also back to the same thing of like, well, your problems are still the same. Your problems are still very much haven't changed. Just because you've got new management in doesn't mean the problems are still any better. There's still a struggle of resources. There's still a struggle of power. And granted, fair enough, if you no longer spending resources on doing a Hunger Games, that you still have more resources, but you still have the issue of overpopulation, where even though you've just had a war and a lot of people have died, you still eventually get to the part where you won't have enough infrastructure for the new people that are being born. So again, it's the fact of what do we do about all these new people being born? Again, I don't feel like the author needs to write another book to kind of answer those questions or carry on Katniss' story. I thought Katniss' story ends quite perfectly here in the last book. But it still sort of leaves it open-ended, the fact of just because new things have changed doesn't mean things are better. Because you've still got the same problems that the Capitol faced. The only difference is, again, it's under new management. But that's book 3. Like I said, I overly enjoy this series greatly. Like I said, it's a fantastic series. It deals with mental health struggles. It deals with a character's fight for survival. Like I said, I always come back to the mental health thing, but the mental health thing is, in my opinion, the most crucial part of why this story just works. Because it's not just the fact of, oh, well, A couple of young kids are put into an arena, they fight each other, somebody wins, they all go home, life goes back to normal. Well, again, no, how life wouldn't go back to normal in a situation like that. You know, there would be struggles, there would be a cost to survival. You know, the things you had to do to survive. You know, that's what it comes down to. It's just trying to survive. But what does survival really mean? And what do you have to do to survive? So that question I will leave with you to ponder. It's a fantastic series. You know, overall I rate these books really highly. Like, they're all 5 stars. The way they deal with it, in like certain things here and there, small little sort of niggles, little sort of tidbits here and there sort of like bother me. You know, like I'm not really a big fan of Gale, and sort of especially how Gale sort of takes more sort of front center focus in in the final book 3. But even so, like, I can't really argue it. I can't really complain. At the end of the day, it works. The story works. I enjoy it for what it is. But yeah, so I highly recommend it. But before I end, and before I come to the end of all this, there's one small thing that I wanted to talk about and mention. That is this. And close to the end, what I wanted to talk about before I wrap this all up is there is a prequel book, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is set in the same universe but set before the events of the Hunger Games books, and it basically follows President Snow and his rise to basically becoming so evil and cruel. Now, I haven't mentioned President Snow at all in this sort of episode, and for good reason, because I was leaving him sort of for this part. But President Snow is the overall force. He is the leader of the capital, and that he is an evil, cruel villain, and even cruel man. He's very smart, like a snake, very cunning. He's the he's the sort of embodiment of what a sort of slimy person is, really. But he works perfectly in the books because you get enough expose and enough story and narrative to understand who he is and what he is and why he is. And his actions speak louder than words. His actions speak for his character fantastically. And overall, he's a great character and a great villain, and that he works well as he is. But he works so well that you don't need to know any more than you do. What makes a good villain is knowing as less about them as possible. It's seeing rather than hearing. It's seeing the actions of what they do. Like, for example, Far Cry 3. One of the best villains in that is Vass. The reason why Vass is such a loved character and so memorable is because of the actions, because of what he does in the games. Like, granted, when you meet him, when he talks, he's very psychotic, very crazy, very Joker-esque. But it's his actions that you don't really know a lot about Vass. You know a little bit, you know enough for the story, but you don't know everything, and that's why he's such a loved character, because you don't need to know so much about him. We don't need to know his backstory to know that he's evil. And that's what I come back to the fact of the prequel books. The prequel books are his story, telling you more about Snow and basically how he became who he is. I haven't read it. I refuse to read it because I don't need to. Not that I've heard bad reviews. I've heard that the book sucks, and everybody I've heard who's read it doesn't like it. But mainly just that fact is the fact that there was no need for him, because he works so well in the story that I didn't need any more. If that makes sense, it just works. He works. That's it. The end. You know what I mean? You don't need to add anything more to the source. If you add more to the source, you just ruin it. You'll ruin the curry, you'll ruin the flavour. Stop adding things because you're just adding things for no reason. And that's what I feel with this book, and the reason why I haven't read it is because what I wanted, if there was going to write a prequel book, I would have wanted the history of the world. I want the beginnings of how the war started. As I mentioned at the beginning, the idea behind that Panem is basically America, right? and we all know the events of Hunger Games as I explained them. But what happened before? What happened to Canada? What happened to Mexico? What happened to South America? What happened to the UK? What happened to Europe? What happened to Russia, to China, to Japan, to the rest of the world? What happened? Are they completely destroyed? Are humans still living there? Are there Hunger Games there? Does the capital not have any sort of like, for example, are the capital completely like border force? Like nobody's getting in. Out is the only survival of humanity. Are there other countries that have technology? Is the war still going on? Um, I want to know what's going on in the UK. Is everybody in the UK dead? Are there still people alive? Is there a government? Again, this is the questions that I wanted answering. Like if you're going to do a prequel book, go back and talk about the events that led up to it. And even you don't have to go into full detail. Just talk about the events of the war. What's happening to the rest of the world, and then sort of lead in to the fact of um, to the rebellions, and then maybe book 2 can be the first ever Hunger Games and the events of the first Hunger Games, or even you could do the first Hunger Games in the first book. But that's what I would have wanted. I would have wanted a history of the world, not a history of one character, but a history of the world. Expand on the lore, or even just the fact of do a prequel series where you don't even do that. Where you just go back and the books are about the first ever Hunger Games, and bring in new characters and bring in a new sort of set of rebellions, and before the capital sort of put like cornered off each district where you could go from district to district. Now it's before that it was very much what life was like. That's the sort of prequel I would have wanted, but instead we got sort of Snow, which I feel like ruins the character, ruins the villain, because the more you know about a villain, the more of the sort of facade, because whenever you build like the whole idea of a martyr, of somebody who is evil, is that it's word of mouth. You know what I mean? If somebody does something and then somebody will recount the story, but they'll always embellish to make the story sound more interesting. So, for example, like you have a villain and he kills, say, like 2 people. Um, Somebody could see that story and embellish it and go, "Well, he slayed many, many, many people," and that he is cruel and that he's evil and that he has this whole mysticism and these powers is so big and powerful. And then that story, like China, like whispering, it goes from people to people, and the story starts to change and it evolves and it becomes more evil. And that's the legend is born of how evil and big and powerful this villain is, and that's kind of the idea of Snow. He's big and powerful because he's made a legend for himself. He's made a story, made an archetype of like, I am this big, powerful, evil person, and that you shouldn't test me because it won't end well for you. And that works because the idea that you get and the picture that is painted of you of who Snow is perfect in these books. And I feel like if you start to talk about the backstory of this character, that whole facade, that whole legend starts to crumble, because then you see the man behind the mask, you see the man behind the screen, and it's like it won't be as good as what you think that villain or that character is, because nothing is as better as what your mind makes up for you to see and believe. That's why I refuse to read it, because I don't want it to ruin my idea and my thought of what Snow is and who Snow is. And also I feel like it's a prequel that's not needed. So because it's not needed, I don't feel like I need it. So no, I haven't read it, and no, I won't read it. But that being said, if you want to read it, give it a go. But me personally, it's not for me. So that was a little thing that I wanted to mention. So that's it. Let's get on to the ending, shall we? Let's wrap this up. And that is all she wrote. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode talking about the Hunger Games series, Hunger Games books. I know it's a bit different than what I've done in the past. For me, like I said, it's a return to form. Hopefully, if you guys like this kind of thing, I will do more book reviews. Maybe instead of doing full trilogies, I will just do single books, or if depending on how many books in the series, like if it's just 3 books, then it's fine, or just do 1 or 2. So we can figure it out as we go along. But I really hope you enjoyed it as normal. And yeah, so time for the selfish plugs before I end. So follow me on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Anchor, and Google Podcasts, as well as quite recently Amazon Music. So if you go into Amazon Music, their podcast section, and type in the Nerdstalgic podcast, you will find me now on Amazon Music, so you can hear me there. I don't know if it will work on your Alexa. I have tried it, but I couldn't see it. Every time I did it, it never could find me. Maybe because I've got an awkward name. I don't know, but hopefully, fingers crossed, it will work on your Alexa. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it's part of the package, so you should be able to. Anyway, so I've done Twitter, I've done Spotify, done Anchor, done Google, I've done Amazon. Check, 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 check. Oh, also, just before I forget, just for the very second before I leave, if you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to rate. There is a new rating system now on Spotify where you can rate me out of 1 to 5 stars. So whatever you feel like is fair, from 1 to 5. If you thought it was crap, do 1. If you thought it was the best thing you ever listened to in your life, put 5. Um, I'm not that I'm asking anybody to put 5, but if you feel like 1 to 5 or 2 to 3 or 4 is what I deserve, then by all means that's what you put on it. And yeah, that should be it. That should be everything, right? Yep, cool. Okay. Again, thank you so very much for listening. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hopefully see you in the next one. So, as always, stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.